Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so pleased that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 14, going on 15 novels of suspense. My brand new book, One Wrong Word. Look at this, is that funny? Comes out February 6th. I'm trying to do the book face. Anyway, it's about rumors and gossip and revenge, and we'll talk about it someday, but not today, because today we are here to talk to the marvelous, brilliant Jonathan Santlofer about, I don't want to cover up his name, about his new book, The Lost Van Gogh, which absolutely it's brand spanking new, you all. It just came out today. This is the pub day, and it is marvelous. It is immersive and riveting and a page turner and incredibly cinematic. It's so visual. And I'll tell Jonathan when I talk to him in a minute that I always feel smart when I read his books. I always feel like, oh, yes, I knew that, or I've seen that painting. And if I haven't seen it, I will look it up. And that is something that we want to talk about today, too. Sherry Steuben says, Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday to you, too. And here is Marlene. So nice to see you, Marlene. I've seen you in person recently. Susie Baldwin is here. When I look over here, I'm looking at the comments, you all. Katie is here, and Emily is here, and Kim is here. Shannon Hansen is here. Oh, this is so marvelous. Renee, hello from Southeast Florida. Nice to see you all. And you are so, hi, Priya. So nice to be here. So wise to be here today to hear about The Lost Van Gogh by the fabulous Jonathan Santlofer. But Emily says she loves Van Gogh's paintings, and we will talk about that. Welcome, welcome, welcome to you all. Let me say, I'm going to let Jonathan talk. What do you think about that? A minute and 51 seconds before, and he has not said a word because I haven't.
That's fine with me, Hank. I'm very happy to have somebody else talking about my book.
Well, it's fabulous. Let me read you all something from the front, which is from Lee Child, the king of us all, who says, only a writer who is an artist, or an artist who is also a writer, could have pulled this off. What did you think when you read that from Lee, Jonathan?
I just love Lee Child, and he is so generous. And, you probably know that, Hank. He is a tremendous supporter of other writers. He has supported other books of mine. When I got that quote, I got teary. I thought it was just so lovely and sweet. He knows I'm an artist and was an artist, or still an artist, and a writer. And so, I put it all together, I guess, in these books. But it's so wonderful to have the support of your community. It just means everything, it really does.
I imagine, and when I saw that quote, I imagined Lee Child reading this book. And I wonder if you imagined that as well. Did you have a picture of that in your mind? And what did that feel like?
No, I didn't imagine him reading the book, but I could picture Lee. And for any of you who don't know or haven't seen Lee in person, he's very tall. He's like 6'4", right? And I am not tall. So what I often imagine is looking up at Lee when I talk to him. So, but I pictured Lee because I know him somewhat, over the years. And it was very thrilling, and particularly, I think, warm, and that he would think to write that.
Yeah, and I do think, he is so wise and so wonderful, authentically wonderful, and he authentically reads these books. And I think that the connection, the writer-artist, artist-writer connection that he discusses in that endorsement is so important, because you couldn't have written this book if no one else but you could have written this. Well, how does that feel to you?
I'm very flattered that you would say that, and that Lee said that. I don't know. I do think we all kind of write the book that we want to read. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's the book that's in our heart, in our head, that we want to give to other people. For me, this book, The Lost Van Gogh and The Last Mona Lisa, which is my last book, are particularly close to me because they're historical novels, they're crime thrillers, they're based on true stories, and they mix fact and fiction. And also they're in the world of art in some way, which is a world I inhabit and have inhabited, and I know very well. I don't know so well the dark underbelly of the art world, though I have investigated it quite a bit, for my books, which is, where this book goes. It goes to a really dark part of history and a dark part of the art world.
So I'm going to stop you right there, you all, because if there was ever a gorgeous tease for the Lost Van Gogh, Jonathan has just given it to us. And we will hear a little bit more about Jonathan and a lot more about this book in about 10 seconds after I tell you, welcome, welcome, welcome to Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. If you don't know what A Mighty Blaze is, it was started at the beginning of the pandemic by the wonderful powerhouse duo of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us all discovering new books and reading new books and learning about new authors and talking to some favorite authors and keeping our reading and writing community together. And we are still going strong today with our, maybe our 300th episode, I have to say, something along those lines. Let me introduce to you the fabulous Jonathan Santlofer. Jonathan, and I'm going to read you his formal bio so you know why we're talking about art and writing. Jonathan Santlofer is the author of 7 novels. His first, The Death Artist, was an international bestseller and translated into 22 languages. His short stories appear in numerous collections. He has been a contributing writer to Art News, Travel and Leisure, and almost every crime and mystery magazine. Santlofer is the recipient of 2 National Endowment for the Arts grants, has been a visiting artist at the American Academy in Rome, the Vermont Studio Center, and serves on the board of IADO, the oldest arts community in the U.S. He is a sought-after teacher and lecturer at colleges and universities and museums across the country. A well-known artist, Santlofer's work is in such collections as the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Art Institute of Chicago, and Tokyo's Institute of Contemporary Art. He lives in New York, where he writes and paints. His newest book, out today, is The Lost Van Gogh, and it is absolutely brilliant. So, Jonathan, you touched on what this book is about. It's about greed and art and relationships and history. Tell us a little bit about the story. Just set it up for us.
I think, first of all, Hank, thank you for that introduction. It sounds, anyhow, it's very nice for you to do. And I want to say that you starting A Mighty Blaze during the pandemic when we were all isolated was such a smart and such a touching thing to do. And I thank you for that. I think it's
our pleasure. It's our pleasure. Caroline and Jenna just knew the moment where things were going to fall apart completely, or they weren't. And the 2 of them pulled us all together, 36 volunteers now still working for sort of 24/7 arts coverage. And it has been amazing. So thank you.
Well, it's great. I would say that I started with a few different ideas that were floating around in my head. One of them was the fantasy that many of us have, which is, you go to a thrift shop and you buy something and you take it home and you paid, as Alex in the book, who is Luke Peroni, the 2 protagonists, Alex buys this painting in a thrift shop for $25. And the thing is, if you read the flap copy on my book, you'll know this. So I'm not giving too much away. But underneath that painting is another painting that they're not sure, but they can't believe it might be a Van Gogh self-portrait. So I had this idea, like going to a thrift shop and buying a painting, which I always imagine I'm going to do. Of course, I never do. And then it turning out to be this incredible thing. So I had that idea in my head, Hank, and I wanted to play with that, but I also wanted to link it to history, to a period in history, and to something I could follow. In other words, a route that painting might have gone about in its, to get to them. So the book actually starts, the first chapter is in 1945 at the end of the war in Paris. And someone you don't quite know right away, but is painting over a painting. And I don't tell you who that painting is or who this person is, but it's not a real spoiler, because if you decide to read my book, in the first couple of pages, you're going to learn all of this. It is a French resistance artist. And this is true though, Hank, that they had people hiding paintings, of course, from the Nazis in very different ways. And they had artists in the French resistance who painted over important paintings so that the Nazis wouldn't steal them.
Let me ask you, just from a technical point of view, can you do that, or do you put something over the painted piece of art and then paint over that and connect it, or do you actually paint over the paint?
No, you would have to, as this artist knows, he puts a layer of paint, of paper, and a new kind of glue that will all dissolve. If you just paint, well, you could paint with watercolor or tempera on top of an oil painting and wash it off, but you would hurt the painting. So it's all very tricky, but it absolutely has been done and can be done. And if any of you have ever seen the wonderful remake of the Thomas Crown Affair with Pierce Brosnan and
Rene Russo.
How could I forget her name? I was madly in love with her. Anyhow, she plays the insurance person. And in that movie, they do that. They paint over Monet with a watercolor. So it's definitely possible. The French resistance, the Nazis went into countries with a list of artworks that they wanted and art collectors they were going to pursue. When I say pursue, murder. They literally went into countries to steal artifacts. Hitler had a architect and a scale model of a museum, the Führer Museum, that he was going to build in his hometown of Austria and fill with all the looted art that they were stealing. They stole, I'm going to get the figures wrong, but it's something like 25% of the art in Europe. And so, there's all of these people were working really hard to save paintings. I mean, there's a great story, and I mentioned this person in my book, this woman who worked at the Jeu de Paume in Paris, which is where the Nazis stored their looted paintings. And she spoke German, but they didn't know it. So she would hide paintings from them, and she would send messages to the resistance underground. It's all really amazing information. I try to use as much factual information in my book.
Let's talk about that for a second, but let me just interrupt you to say welcome to everyone on Instagram. We are so happy to have you with us here today. We are talking today about The Lost Van Gogh by Jonathan Santlofer, and all of this incredible history that he is telling us about right now, fascinating and riveting and revealing, is all sort of the undercurrent of what happened before in this book, and you will learn so much about it in this novel. I mean, one of the quotes in this book is that you say a stolen painting is a stolen life. And that is just so powerful. Talk a little bit about what that means and why that's important to the book.
Well, I did, as you do, I'm sure, for many books, I did a lot of research. And when I didn't know right from the beginning that I was going to be talking about looted art. But once I did, I started reading dozens of books about it and about the Nazis' very organized programs of art looting. And I stole that line that a stolen artwork was a stolen life from a wonderful writer, a nonfiction book. But what she was talking about was, to get to this art, the Nazis would take over collections. Now, they would get people to sell their artwork and all their things to the Third Reich. But when they said sell it to them, there was a gun to these people's heads, number one. Number two, they would send money to their bank accounts, and then they would freeze their bank accounts. Ultimately, most of the people whose artwork they stole, they killed in concentration camps. And I mean, I read a lot of personal accounts of people who traced, their grandparents and great grandparents and tried to put together, art collections, and did it. And incredibly moving stories and
It's
very
interesting
sad.
because that passion comes through in this novel, The Lost Van Gogh, which, as you said, began with sort of the conceit of what happens if someone goes to a yard sale or, you know,
Yeah,
secondhand sale and finds a treasure. And your writer mind sort of said, what treasure might that be? And you did all this research to and learned more about the Nazi looting of the art during
yeah,
the war. How did that change this book? It took this light little idea and
right.
made it a very powerful and very moving story.
Thank you. I hope so. You know, I asked myself several times, is it okay in what I hope I'm writing to be a very entertaining
Mhm.
thriller? I mean, that's always in my mind. I really want the reader to have like a great time and not be able to put the book down. And I thought, is it okay to use such serious subject matter? And then through a variety of things, I realized it's in fact the best way to get your message across. And the old film director Billy Wilder made The Apartment, Some Like It Hot. He was a German Jew. His whole family died at Auschwitz. Now I know I'm getting on a dark whatever, but Billy Wilder was a director in Hollywood, and I watched many interviews with him. I love his movies, and he talked about the only way to reach an audience is to entertain them, make them laugh, make them cry, make them be with you. And I thank Billy Wilder in my acknowledgments because I felt like he gave me permission to use really serious subject in what I hope is a very entertaining book. I mean, I think it's a tense book at times, which I love, but I never wanted it to be, depressing or
No, and I think that, one of the things that writers work for is to make sure that the stakes in the novel are high enough for people to do what they do. So this is incredibly entertaining, incredibly cinematic, absolutely a page turner. It's a thriller, an art heist, historical, contemporary thriller, international thriller set in Amsterdam a lot,
yeah,
and New York. And you can't put it down. But as I was saying earlier, your books always make me feel smart. So I think that you're wise readers, so many of whom are here today. Eleanor Lipman is here. Hello, Eleanor.
Eleanor Lipman.
That you're here.
Ellie
Yay
Lipman
for Eleanor.
is the most wonderful. Talk about entertaining writers.
Yeah.
Oh my God, she
So funny and so much fun.
funny, so
Absolutely.
talented, so wonderful, and she's also an incredibly wonderful, lovely person. So
Yes.
yeah,
Indeed. So this is now the Eleanor Lipman fan club, which is starting right now. We are the founding members, and welcome here today. And she is saying, can't wait to read this. You don't have to avoid the dark. And the dark and the light and the love and the passion in this book are so palpable and wonderful, not to mention the mystery. There is a big whodunit and a big why done it. So the key of this, and there's a moment in the book, and it doesn't give anything away. This is on like page 3, where they, as you were just saying, they start to lift this wax paper and they see something. And the way you describe what it is, I clearly saw it. I clearly saw this painting in my head. Now, what did you say and how did you do that?
Well, what I did, first of all, I should say that my dream would be to own a Van Gogh, which is never going to happen. But as you probably know, I made copies of Van Goghs so that I could sort of have them, but then I gave them all away. How did I do it? Well, I looked at Van Gogh paintings. I went to Amsterdam to look at Van Gogh self-portraits that I hadn't seen. And because I went to art school for so many years, it's the way I think, Hank. I think visually. So I can put myself in that room with Luke and Alex, and he's just scraping this painting off, and she's watching and taking photographs. And I think I grew up more on movies and art, certainly than in my writing. I know that, but I always am like walking through the scene as I'm writing it, I'm seeing it. So it was as exciting for me, to do it. I knew I was going to write the scene. I didn't know exactly how I was going to write it. But that was fun. That was a fun scene for me.
Yeah, I can really see it. And when it gets to be a movie, and it has to be that moment when you see the spiky paint strokes and those vibrant colors, and you would know it anywhere, just from the corner. That's just completely remarkable. Now, going to the title though, The Lost
Yes.
Van Gogh is about a theoretical lost Van Gogh self-portrait.
Right.
Is there such a thing?
We're not sure. So when Van Gogh died, he was living in Auvers-sur-Oise, France, a small, beautiful town north of Paris, about an hour or so north of Paris, where I went. By the way, that's the best research. Forget the Nazi books, go to France, go to Amsterdam, which is thrilling. So Van Gogh went there to live. He was 36 years old. He lived the last 70 days of his life in this little town in France, and he made 75 paintings in 70 days. So amazing. And then he died, and a young artist friend of his and his brother they laid him out in the bar of the restaurant bar of where he was living in the Auberge Ravou, which you can visit. You can visit Van Gogh's last room. It's so, oh my God.
Another great scene in your book.
I took a French friend with me when I had an appointment to see his room and the place, but my French is really terrible. So a good friend of mine came with me, a French friend, and she was able to talk not the owner, but the guide into actually letting me into the room. You usually have to stand away, but the room is tiny. Here's the most famous artist of all time, right? He lived in this tiny, tiny attic room. It's so moving. He lived like a monk, but his father was a pastor. He had trained for the clergy and dropped out. So he was very devout person. So it made sense to me in many ways. But of course, I've lost your question entirely.
Oh, the Lost Van Gogh, of course, that's the lost element. So is there really a self-portrait?
So when he died, they took these last 70 paintings, they laid his body out, they surrounded his head with all yellow and golden flowers. I mean, it's so beautiful. And they put on the walls all of his paintings. Now, this one artist friend of his wrote a long letter, and in that letter, he talks about the various paintings, and no one's quite sure, but he does refer to a painting that doesn't seem to exist anymore. So, it's possible that painting disappeared. After Van Gogh died, his brother, the art dealer, was the estate person, but his brother died 6 months later. And his brother's wife ended up with all of the Van Gogh estate. But what happened at the funeral and that painting? If it was there, we don't know. And, those are the kind of things that.
So I just got goosebumps. I honestly did, because and especially after reading this, I truly believe that this painting exists somewhere. We just have to go to a yard sale or something.
Well, I was going to say, Hank, let's go to a yard sale and find it,
The journey itself would be worth it. What if it were found? What would that mean?
I talk about that, in the book, because they're speculating whether or not this is that actual painting. It would be worth, if you think about the paintings that have sold at auction, a very important Andy Warhol sold for $200 million. That lost and found, maybe not even authentic, Leonardo da Vinci sold 2 years ago for $450 million. So imagine what a Van Gogh's last self-portrait would be worth. Would be really nice if they found it, and I hope it wouldn't end up like the Leonardo on a Saudi Arabian prince's yacht, and none of us can see it. I talk in the book, my characters talk about who should own important art.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about, because the story started with the looting of art by the Nazis, and it went to private owners. and some to museums. And now people are saying we should have our art back. This belongs to my family. Who does it? I mean, I know this is an impossible question. Connie says, I just saw the Van Gogh experience in DC. Now I can't wait to read this book. Very wise. And there are pictures in the back. I'm turning to them right now, by Jonathan himself, which are gorgeous. And this is Vincent and Theo Van Gogh. And a very difficult question, and one that is touched on in the book. Who should have those? What is fair?
I think, look, museums are in crisis about this today, Hank, because so much work. I mean, we're not just talking about, the spoils of war. We're talking about going into other countries, stealing artifacts, taking what used to be called primitive art out of, underdeveloped nations. All of this is in question. And I sometimes lose sleep over the fact that there'll be nothing left in the museums. Now, you do know, though, that many families that want the work back, they don't really want it back. What they want is a plaque on the wall that says, the collection of so-and-so, their great-grandfather. They just want it acknowledged. And many of the families that argue for this art, they make a deal with the museums to let them keep it. We do know about the ones who sell it at auction, and I'm not against that. They can. If you think about if your grandfather owned, an important, Dr. Gachet, which, by the way, somebody I know is making a film about that. And then, it was stolen from them. Wouldn't you feel you had some ownership to that painting? So, this is a big question in the world right now about that.
And it is art, that the connection of art and the sort of universality of art is such a specific and incredible, unique is the word I'm looking for, such a unique thing that there is just only one of these things.
Yeah, well, that's what makes it what it is. When in my last book, The Last Mona Lisa, many people would ask me, well, why is the Mona Lisa? Oh, you have it. You're amazing. Why was the Mona Lisa? Why is it so important? And I would say, well, it's an artifact of a time. You have to remember Leonardo da Vinci was one of 5 or 6 high Renaissance artists. That's it. Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael, Titian. And he only made 15 or 17 paintings in his whole life. We all think of Leonardo because of The Last Supper, his notebooks, his inventions. He was an amazing artist. But in terms of oil paintings, he was a slacker. He only made 15 really or 16 paintings. So they are wildly valuable. And the Mona Lisa was a commission. It was a commission to paint this guy's wife. It was his new young wife. And Leonardo, he just never gave them the painting. I don't know what happened exactly, but he was unhappy with it. He kept the painting with him till he died in France. And it went into the French courts, and then Napoleon stole it and put it on his bedroom wall. And then it ended up in the Louvre. So this is why art becomes important. It's like I say, it's like owning JFK's golf clubs or Marilyn Monroe's engagement ring. These are artifacts from our culture that are much more than what they are.
Much more than what they are. I remember we've all seen, and one of the things in your book that I adore so much, and I have 2 more questions and then we'll go to the audience. And you all, listening to Jonathan, you all talk makes you realize how marvelous this book is. I did envision Rene Russo as the main character, I have to say, throughout, and Pierce Brosnan as well. I'm afraid. It worked really perfectly, I do have to say. How fascinating this book is, and what a page turner it is. But the art, just writing about real art is such a skill, because if you as a reader know what Night Watch looks like, and Jonathan talks about Night Watch, and you'll see it in your mind's eye. If you don't, you might go look it up. You might go see what the people in the story are seeing. I remember one of my favorite paintings ever starting from when I was a little girl, is called Deer in the Forest by Franz Marc. And I still love it. And my father took me to see it at the Corcoran in New York many years ago. And I burst into tears. I burst into tears at the real painting. And there's nothing, I probably still would. And there's nothing that does that like art. And I know I'm babbling, but how do you transfer that passion into a fast-paced international art heist thriller?
Well, I love that you said that. I also think, I never think of myself as writing art novels. I mean, it's not, art plays a big part, but I always think, of this totality, this book first, this thriller, this mystery, whatever it is, but the art is part of it. And it's the way I see. What you experienced, by the way, in front of that Franz Marc is called Stendhal theory. It's when you have an emotional experience in front of an artwork. And it's a real thing. People, their heart rate accelerates, they get teary. One of the things that's hard about art is that it's slow. In our world is so fast. But the great thing, and I say to people who, when you go to a museum, go to a room where there's, not the main show. Go to a room where nobody is, and just find a painting you like and look at it. And you can be with it. You can really feel it. You can look closely, see the artist's brushstroke. One of the things, and I know one of the reasons people love Van Gogh is because those paintings are so tactile and physical. It's like he's sculpting with his paint. And of course, his life story is so poignant and sad, and which I, by the way,
mysterious too, as you point out in The Lost Van Gogh, was he maybe murdered?
Yeah. I mean, I leave it, Luke and Alex at the end of the book. I'm not going to tell you what happens at all, but they're talking about what really happened, or what happened to Van Gogh. And it's a big question. There are a lot of questions around the day that Van Gogh died. So I'm not going to ruin that.
It's just, suffice it to say, it is marvelous. It is a page turner. It is as immersive as a marvelous painting. And you see this happening in your mind's eye so gorgeously. One last question, and let me ask you, maybe two. How you were thinking, just a writerly question now. This book is so carefully structured in the two different time periods and several points of view, and yet so easy to read, so uncomplicated. It's complex, but it's completely readable. How top of mind is that for you, that propulsiveness of the storytelling?
It's super important. I mean, I think, I think about it, Hank, particularly as I'm rewriting and structuring my book. I don't, I put out a post today about the book's release, and, somebody asked me a similar question, and I said, I don't want my sweat equity on the page. I remembered after graduate school, my mother wanted me to take her, because I went to art school and she paid for it. She wanted me to take her to galleries, and I took her to this exhibition, one of them, of Robert Ryman's white paintings, which I loved. And my mother was like, "Are you kidding me?" And they looked so easy. And then I pointed them out, but I said, ease or difficulty is not the point. I said, Mom, when you go to the ballet, do you want to see the ballerinas sweat? No, you don't want to see the effort. You want to see the beauty. So I try very hard to make the experience, I try to remove myself so that the reader is just, going along. I think the beginning of every book, you have to fall into it. You have to trust the writer that person is going to deliver that. I have a lot of mysterious things at the beginning of the book, and I hope my reader will say, okay, I know he's going to tell me what happens. And,
I mean, that's a real skill, though, because sometimes when a writer is going for suspense, they wind up with confusion. And when you go for suspense, you wind up with, I cannot wait to see what's going to happen next. I need to turn the page.
Well, you do that too. I mean, that is what we aim for, right? And, I want my reader to just be zooming along And then later they can ask themselves questions, or they just, I think that's the fun of falling into a book, right? To be immersed in it and to move with the writer, move with the characters. I mean, my characters take me places I wouldn't even expect. I don't know what they're doing sometimes, so.
Well, it's so much fun. An international art theft thriller, which takes place in New York and in Amsterdam and outside of Paris. It's marvelous. It's immersive. I say it's educational a little bit.
Well, that's okay. I like learning some things. I don't want people to think, that I'm there to teach them, because I'm not. But I also,
that's the seamless part, Jonathan. That is the seamless part. You'll never look at art the same way. I promise you that. You will never look at art the same way.
I'm happy to hear that. I know that during the pandemic, when the last Mona Lisa came out, people wrote to me and said, thank you for taking me to Italy, during the pandemic. And I loved that. And I actually did that, Hank. I went and lived in the piazza in Florence, where my character was supposedly where he was living.
Somebody has to do the tough research. Somebody has to go to Paris. Somebody has to go to Amsterdam, to all the museums and the canals and the flower sellers. I know Margaret is putting up the questions now, because she's saying in the back room, she's saying Hank is never going to stop talking. She's just never going to stop. And why should I? Because this book is so marvelous. But Sherry is saying, what was the hardest part about writing this book?
That's a great question. And I think we were just sort of talking about it. The hardest part of writing this book was making it seem easy, that it's not hard. Because as Hank pointed out, there's a story that goes through the contemporary story where they're searching for the painting. And then there's the story of how the painting got lost. And so I had to juxtapose those. And my feeling is each story should tell you something about the other story. And when you get to the end of, let's say, a little section in the past, you should think, oh, I don't want to leave this. But then you're happy to come back to the other story. So that's the hard part, going back and forth. But again, making it seem like it's not hard. And Hank, this as a writer. So let's say you are juxtaposing two stories. There are natural places for you to interrupt that action. They present themselves to you, and you go, here's where the reader's going to want to know something about how that painting got to New York. And then you write that.
And that's very clear in the novel, that you think, ooh, I wish I knew about that. And then there it is. And then at the end of that section, you think, oh, now I understand that. And you learn something that you need for the next part. It works gorgeously. How does it take? Do you have an outline? Do you know where this is going?
No, I wish I had an outline. What I do is I have my thoughts. I have some notes, a lot of notes actually. And I do a lot of notes in longhand, and then I write on my computer. And then basically what I'd say is I develop the outline as I'm writing the book. So I'm usually 2 chapters ahead of where I'm writing, So I'm writing this, and then I'm writing notes over here. I have a pad next to my computer, and I write down, okay, they need to do X, they need to see. Now, that doesn't always work. So I'm a constant rewriter, because I'll see something, or I write something and I think, oh, wait, no, I should have told the reader this, or I should have given them a clue to this.
Too soon for that.
Yeah.
I just I'm slipping through this because we do it exactly the same way.
Yes. Oh, so is this yours with like an outline with timeline?
Exactly. That I make as I write it.
Oh, you know what? This is I have yellow legal pad pages. I scotch tape them together. They become these long, ridiculous scrolls, and they have the timeline on the side, like Tuesday, March, blah, blah. Oh, we do. Can I borrow that for my next book, yours?
We can switch. Or we should teach a class in this, maybe.
Well, it's very important, right? To write it down and see it.
Yes.
No?
Otherwise, someone says, was it only 2 weeks ago that she was killed? And you're like, I don't know.
Right. And when I teach writing, I used to teach it a lot. I would tell my students, You must figure out your timeline. As you go along, go back, think about it, because it will help you figure out what you're doing. You
Well,
have to
somebody will be hungry, or it'll be dark, or it'll be cold, or they'll need a
That's
coat,
right.
or the street lights will be on, or somebody should be at work, or it'll be Sunday and the post office is closed. You know,
Right.
just all that kind of stuff.
That's
Digression. All right, let's take
no,
more.
no, it's a good. Okay. What did you learn about?
Katie, hi, Katie says, what did you learn about yourself? Oh, Katie, after writing this novel.
You know, I did learn something about myself because, going back to what we talked about a little while ago, to be very honest with anyone who's watching and with you, Hank, I really did not know very much about Nazi art looting, and that the systematic way it was done and how it was done. And I learned about that period in a way, in a very deep immersion into that period, that I think that changed who I am. I mean, okay, I'm going to admit something that's crazy. I had never read The Diary of Anne Frank because my elementary school, I'll blame them, but I will also say that I think because I was a boy, which is so absurd, and girls read that book. But anyhow, I was going to Amsterdam, and I had an appointment at the Anne Frank house, and I thought, I have to read this book. It is a brilliant, beautiful document of a time, and it is so filled with hope. It is so beautifully written. It makes you laugh. She makes fun of her parents. It's just this wonderful thing. And so when you write a book, every book gives me something, and you know that too, I'm sure. But so, I mean, just the gift of reading, Diary of a Young Girl, the Anne Frank book. I mean, it took me till I was like 100 years old. I'm embarrassed to say that, really,
And you gave us all such a gift with your portraits.
I had, thanks to a friend, I had time alone in the Anne Frank house. I went both with a group and by myself. And that I did a drawing based on something they have there. They have a light box with photographs of each of the people who were in hiding. And, Otto Frank, Anne's father, is the only survivor. And I stood there for a while because I was alone, and I did these pencil sketches of these people, because when I draw something, I connect with it in a different way. But boy, that is a really moving experience to be there. I know many people have done it. So yeah, I think I learned maybe a better part of myself.
And isn't that what books are for? To change us as a writer and as a reader. That's the power of a novel.
At the best, yes, absolutely. I mean, I would hope. I mean, I guess I never think about my books as changing people, because it would scare me to think but I certainly hope people come away knowing things and maybe feeling things they didn't before.
Certainly true with the Lost Van Gogh. Do we have time for one more question? Okay. Is there an author's note at the end telling us fact versus fiction? I'm always interested to know. Very wise.
Yes, I did it at the end of the last Mona Lisa. What had happened is my editor actually asked me to do it, and then I did it again in the Lost Van Gogh. I mean, I thought, yes, people should know which parts are real and which parts I invented. And it's actually right before that part, Hank, that I'm looking for it as I talk to you.
Okay.
There's a page, and it says, what does it even say? It's like, did I write this? There's so much stuff at the back end of this book, like a reading guide and author's note there. We're both doing it, stereo. And I say there, what you have read in the novel mixes fact and fiction. And I tell my reader what was true, which characters were true. And I think that's good to know. It's fun to know.
But read the book first, and then let yourself be surprised and baffled and troubled and intrigued by what you realize is true. And you kind of can tell when you read this book. I think you can kind of tell.
I think, isn't that what all artists do? They take things from the world, from our culture, from life, in real and, factual things, real things, and they recreate them, they change them, right? They fictionalize them, they paint them, and that's what's fun. It's what's exciting to do.
It's fun and exciting when it's pub day, right? It's not so fun and exciting when you're sitting there thinking, oh my golly, I have no idea what happens.
Oh my
What
God,
happens
no, although I want to say this, that when I'm writing, yeah, there are those days that I just want to rip it all up, if you can rip up your computer and stop and all that. But on the other hand, I love doing it. It's more fun to me than the pub date, to be totally honest, because the pub date stuff fills me with anxiety.
Yeah.
It just does. I just can't help it. The
But on
writing
the days that you're writing and you have a good idea and you
Yeah.
just know it's a good idea and you think, where did that come from?
Yeah, and you're just writing it, and it's writing itself, right? And the characters are talking and they're doing these things, and you think, wow, I used to say that about painting too. There are the days it just happens and the days it doesn't. But I will say that my great graduate school painting teacher, who was a man I just was crazy about, he used to say, you have to work every day because you never know which day is going to be the good day. And it's so true, because sometimes, you wake up, you're a little upset about something, you have a headache, I don't know, and you sit down to work, and that work carries you, and you discover something. So you can't on that day say, no, I'm not going to work because I'm in a bad mood and blah, blah, blah. So he always said to us in his class, he said, you create your own inventory. And I love that. And you know what else he said, Hank? I have this quote over my desk. He said, nobody forces you to do this, so don't complain about it. And I just love that, because of course I whine all the time, and then I look up and I think, just be quiet. Nobody makes you do this.
And you're so lucky. We're so incredibly lucky. And we are so incredibly grateful that you came today. I hope you will have time later today to look at the comments, because there is just full of applause and ovation and adulation and praise, and people saying they cannot wait to read this novel. It is The Lost Van Gogh by Jonathan Santlofer. If you love it, and I know you will, go and find The Last Mona Lisa, which could be read in either order. I know they're a series, and I'm hoping there'll be more, but you can read them in any order. You can just grab the new one right now and then hop out and get Mona Lisa. Is there going to be another one? Do you know?
I think there might be. Yeah.
We can't wait. We can't wait.
So.
But we'll focus on this one now.
Yeah. Thank you. You're one of the best you've had experience. You're one of the best interviewers ever. I mean, you just get me talking and excited, and it's great. It's so great.
Thank you. That's so kind of you. Thank you. And let's do this. Let's give away a book. I'm not giving away mine, but someone at Jonathan's at Source Books, at the fabulous Source Books, will give away a copy of The Lost Van Gogh. So let's spin and see who will win. Let's spin the wheel of fun and see who wins. Is this not great? This is fabulous, isn't it? I really want music.
I love that.
And we should hum or something like that. And the winner is Kathy Lanigan. Wonderful. Kathy, this is so great. You will absolutely adore this. And Kathy is a stalwart fan of Crime Time. So we are very pleased.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm glad. It's not quite as great as going to the thrift store and finding the $1 million painting, but it's
a $1 million book. It's $1 million.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Let me keep you there for 2 seconds, you all, while I lean over at my desk to show you who will be here next Tuesday before we say goodbye to Jonathan. Next Tuesday at 3 p.m. ET. Next Tuesday at 3 p.m. ET is Matthew Blake. Is that right? Is it 3 or 4 for Matthew? I'm looking at my calendar here. This is so, yes, 3 p.m. I had this. 3 p.m. ET, Matthew Blake. His new book, Anna O, which is an incredibly buzzy about a woman who may or may not have killed 2 people while she was asleep. And after that happened, she has been asleep for 4 years. Does the doctor wake her up to stand trial? Or is it better if he just leaves her sleeping and unknowing about justice? Anna O by Matthew Blake at 3 o'clock next week. And then at 4, look who we have. Yvette Ligo. The best. Tess Gerritsen, The Spy Coast, the beginning of her new series about the Martini Club, a group of retired CIA agents who live in Maine and come across a dead body in someone's driveway, and they have to go back on the job. The Spy Coast by Tess Gerritsen, which is marvelous. And today we have been talking about The Lost Van Gogh by Jonathan Santlofer. Kathy Glanigan won a copy. Jonathan, happy Pub Day.
Thank you so much, Hank. I can't think of a better way to spend my pub day than with you and your followers, and I really appreciate it too. It's terrific.
And you can find Jonathan on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everywhere. Please find him. Go to his website, jonathansantlofer.com. And until next Tuesday, you all, thank you so much for coming. And remember, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you next.